BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. Black Box Ned 88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And just a quick reminder, every Monday is Zodiac Mondays. Wednesday is an Ask Me Anything. That's an AMA, so please drop your questions below for things that you would like discussed here on the show. And Friday is an Anything Goes. Any subject is fair game, mostly talking about true crime, serial killers, the Zodiac Killer, but any subject is welcome. Alright, so please share some ideas in the comment section about what you would like to hear about on this channel, and let's get started. Okay, hello everyone, and it is Monday, a Zodiac Monday, and today we're going to be talking all about the Zodiac killer suspect Donald Lee Booyak and some incidents from his life of criminal behavior. Last week on the channel, perhaps you'll remember that we were doing something on the Zodiac Unabomber connection once again, more precisely talking about some of the claims of Douglas Oswell, who authored the book The Unabomber and the Zodiac. And when I was on Amazon.com, I happened to come across a particular comment that was written by an individual named Kevin Robert Brooks. Once again, this is from Amazon.com. It's just a review. And Kevin Robert Brooks had this to say about Ted Kaczynski as a Zodiac killer suspect. The Zodiac killer was Donald Lee Booyak. For starters, Ted Kaczynski doesn't in any way fit the physical description. Ted Kaczynski was small, of a slight build, with very blunt hair. The Zodiac was stocky, heavy-set, strong build, receding hairline, and the modus operandi are very different for Ted Kaczynski, who targeted people who were involved with technology. The Zodiac mostly targeted young kids. Well, we'll say something about that in just a second, but the Zodiac was in it for attention. I could go on, and I will. And this was written once again by Kevin Robert Brooks, who is perhaps the largest proponent of the Donald Lee Booyak theory online. And he did, though, give Douglas Oswell's book on the Unabomber and the Zodiac 3 stars, not a 0 or anything like that. But I wanted to use this as an opportunity to explore some different aspects of the Zodiac Killer mystery, as well as doing something that I had meant to do for a very long time, and that was to look at Donald Lee Booyak just in terms of his criminal history and his criminal behavior, and find out what really is going on with this guy, because we did one episode for Lawrence Kane on criminal history, and we did one on, well, it was an attempt to do one on the timeline of events in regards to Lawrence Kane, and we've done some similar things for Ross Sullivan. But Donald Lee Booyak is someone who's a little bit different than some of the Zodiac killer suspects. When we talk about people like Lawrence Kane, like Ted Kaczynski, as we said when we were reading off that comment there by Kevin Robert Brooks, these guys were criminals. They were convicted criminals. Lawrence Kane had a huge criminal history. You can find more about that in our upload here on Lawrence Kane Criminal History, as well as going to the Lawrence Kane WordPress that is available here on the internet for free. And when it comes to somebody like Donald Lee Booyak, he fits into that category in the sense that not only was he a convicted criminal, but he was also a convicted murderer. Donald Lee Booyak was born in 1936, and hence the title of Kevin Robert Brooks's writings about him, The Montana Connection. This becomes the foundation of the connection between the Zodiac Killer and the state of Montana. And this ties into a certain experience that Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard had at Lake Berryessa on September 27th of 1969, when the Zodiac Killer is wearing the hood, when in costume with the knife. The only confirmed incident in Zodiac activity in which the victims were stabbed with a knife, and the perpetrator wrote "by knife" on the car door, or someone did anyway. But the point is that this becomes a larger piece of the puzzle, because at Lake Berryessa, in the transcripts, there is a particular name, and that is Deer Lodge Prison. Deer Lodge Prison in Montana. And what is that coming from? Does that mean that we have to have someone who had been at Deer Lodge Prison, who is familiar with Deer Lodge Prison, who was talking about Deer Lodge Prison from Montana? Do we have any Zodiac killer suspects who have been there? How about Donald Lee Booyak? Someone who had been in prison for 11 years, serving 11 years of a life sentence for murder, and the person that he murdered was an individual named Otto Fossen, whom we'll be talking about today. And this is a big difference between him and many other suspects because there are numerous Zodiac killer suspects, numerous people who are connected to the Zodiac killer mystery who get accused of criminal wrongdoings, but no one has any certainty about whether or not they murdered anybody. Donald Lee Booyak goes into a different category because he was indeed a convicted murderer. To learn more about the criminal history of Donald Lee Booyak, I would actually like to go over to this article that had been written in the local papers, and I have to give a shout out to BrokenMountains.com, who has assembled some of the old news articles about Donald Lee Booyak. I mean, it's really is great to just find all of this stuff here on the internet, not only about Donald Lee Booyak, but also just material about Otto Fossen, the man who was murdered by him. Now, the first link in the chain of events that led to the roadside slaying of Otto Fossen, a veteran Liberty County undersheriff, was forged in Havre, Montana, about at 8:15 p.m. when a Monarch sedan owned by Clarence Iverson of Frontier, Saskatchewan, was stolen. Iverson and some companions had parked their cars on 2nd Street and had gone into Butte, into a store near a coffee shop for breakfast. Leaving the coffee shop, Iverson missed his car and called the police. And this begins the unfortunate criminal saga that would just play out. Donald Lee Booyak, as you heard there, he was accused of stealing a car, and then, as I understand this, he was driving that stolen vehicle, and one of the tires blew out, and then he decided to abandon the stolen vehicle, but already, because this individual Iverson had called the police, then he is just trying to get away from that car with the blown-out tire, so he started hitchhiking. And the police in Montana had some idea about what was going on, so they're trying to set up roadblocks. They realize that this criminal is on the loose, this car thief is on the loose, but Donald Lee Booyak was trying to hitchhike. And from what I've learned from Kevin Robert Brooks's channel, is that the people who picked up Donald Lee Booyak described him as disheveled. They said his hair was a mess. And a characteristic about Donald Lee Booyak is he always appeared to be somewhat sick. He appeared to be somewhat uneasy, like the way that somebody would look if, say, for example, they had the flu or they had a very intense cold. Donald Lee Booyak would look like that all the time. It's possible because of a particular childhood illness that he had. It was strep and tonsillitis that were not treated very well, and that affected his physical appearance. But he's hitchhiking, and he's let out of this car, and Otto Fossen, the person that he murdered, was, as you heard there, the deputy undersheriff, went over to question him. And let's read a little bit more about that from this article. Havre police sent out a radio alert on the stolen sedan, and a police officer picked up Iverson at the coffee shop and started west on Highway 2 on the possibility that the car could be located near the intersection of Highway 7 and Highway 2 west of Havre, Montana. The police radio brought news to the missing car that had been in Guilford, and the driver had attempted to remove the license plates. Oh, that's another thing. He did try to take off someone else's license plates, but then he abandoned that. And what happens is, as you heard, Otto Fossen, the person whom Donald Lee Booyak murdered, got into a confrontation with him. He tried to question him. They got into a scuffle, and if I can comprehend the course of events, they actually end up inside Otto Fossen's police car, and that is when 5 shots are fired by Donald Lee Booyak that enter into Otto Fossen's chest, neck, and throat. Now, Otto Fossen did not die immediately, but he comes tumbling out backward, and then he starts to land on the grass. But he doesn't die immediately because the people who end up taking him to the hospital say that he is still alive, and he is still alive during the ambulance ride even. But once he arrives at the hospital, he has already passed away, and he is pronounced dead on arrival. So Donald Lee Booyak then attempts to steal, well, I guess you'd say he does steal Otto Fossen's police car, and then he starts to drive that for a while, gives up, abandons it in a field, and then we have to go to our next article. Also, thank you to Broken Mountains for sharing all of these articles here. Donald Booyak charged with first-degree murder. 200 armed men join the manhunt here on Saturday. Deputy Sheriff Otto Fossen was shot and killed Saturday morning while attempting to question a hitchhiker at the Joplin approach on Highway 2. 5 shots were fired at close range into the lawman's throat and chest. He died en route to Liberty County Hospital. Held in connection with the shooting and charged with first-degree murder is Donald L. Bujok, age 21, of Roundup, Montana. The arrest of Bujok followed a hectic day in Liberty County in which one of the largest manhunts in North Montana history was undertaken. Now, if we're going to talk about Joplin, Montana, I have to confess, I've never been to Montana. I'm a West Virginian on the other side of the country. My only exposure to Joplin, Montana has been, well, I guess you would say prior to using YouTube more frequently and putting out this channel, I used to just spend countless amounts of time on the internet reading about things that I didn't really need to be reading about, and I got on those like real estate websites like Trulia and Zillow, and I would just look at what are the cheapest pieces of land or the cheapest houses that you can buy state by state. Let's see what's cheap in Wyoming or Kansas or Alabama, any state. And when I got to Montana, I found that Joplin, Montana had the cheapest houses in the state at the time. But the thing is, when I was reading about Joplin, Montana, it was saying that it wasn't even classified as a town. The stuff on these real estate websites, whichever ones they were, Trulia or Zillow or something like that, they described Joplin, Montana as a land management area or some equivalent to that. So we're dealing with some far out country there. So I can easily believe that this 200 armed men manhunt looking for Donald Lee Booyak is one of the largest in northern Montana history. And I do have to emphasize, I've never been there. All I've learned about Montana has come from reading up on Ted Kaczynski, the stories of Ryan Leaf, the former quarterback, and this stuff here from Donald Lee Booyak. So the affair started at about 8 a.m. when Sheriff Dodds Keith and Deputy Otto Fossen were notified that a man had stolen a car and was heading this way from Havre. Keith and Fossen drove toward Joplin with the purpose of setting up a roadblock. On the way, Keith stopped to set up the roadblock. Fossen traveled to Joplin with the intent of following the stolen car. This would put the law officers in front and in the back of the car. So they're going to be like on both sides of him. They would be boxing him in on the road, and that was the plan. Fossen ran across the stolen car about 2 miles east of Joplin. He reported this on the radio to Keith, and there was no one near the car, and then drove to Joplin to see if anyone had gone to Joplin for help. That is the abandoned car that we mentioned. Remember, the tire had blown out, so Donald Lee Booyak had decided to abandon the car. And then they went to see that if someone had gone to Joplin for help. Police radio reported that someone had tried to steal a set of license plates, but the person had been scared off. While in Joplin at the Union Elevator Company, someone was making inquiries of Cecil Hayden. Fossen saw a car that let out a hitchhiker at the corner of US 2 and Joplin Road. Fossen called Keith on the car radio and said that he would check a hitchhiker out on the highway. Keith then decided to return to his office in Chester, Montana. Cecil Hayden, manager of the Farmers Union Elevator Company, had been talking to Fossen and saw him attempt to question the hitchhiker. Hayden reported that Fossen had a scuffle with the man. And this is where the events take place, that Donald Lee Booyak, as we said, shot him 5 times. Now, a point that I did hear somewhere, and I'm not sure the exact article that I read this one in, but they were saying that Fossen was able to get off 2 shots as well. Donald Lee Booyak shot Otto Fossen 5 times, but Fossen fired 2 shots, and as far as I can tell, it doesn't appear that either one of those actually hit Donald Lee Booyak, but then Fossen tumbles into the grass, and as we said, he died en route to the hospital. But there you have it, though. Donald Lee Booyak turned himself into a murderer at the age of 21, and these newspaper articles are from October 10th, 1957. So, instantly, you can see 12 years before 1969, 11 years before the murders at Lake Herman Road, and Donald Lee Booyak is let out of prison just before the Lake Herman Roaders, December 20th of 1968, and a lot of people are saying that like he was let out around December 17th, December 18th of 1968, and they're like, is it possible that this guy Donald Lee Booyak could have moved from Montana all the way down to the San Francisco Bay Area, murdered David Faraday, murdered Betty Lou Jensen, and then just fled the area. Is it possible that he could have even made that trip in 3 days? I'm not even going to entertain any type of counter argument like that because I want it to be very clear. Somebody can move from Montana to California in 1 day, in 2 days, in 3 days. Perhaps crazier things have happened. Instead, what I would want to do is to look at examining the actions of Donald Lee Booyak in a different way. I tried to go through all of Kevin Robert Brooks's YouTube videos again. If you would like to hear a more general overview of Donald Lee Booyak as a Zodiac killer suspect, I will include a link to the first episode I ever did on him, simply called Zodiac Killer Donald Lee Booyak. That is a very general overview, and then you can just hear all of the simple things. That really isn't talking so much about the Fossen murder, but when you want to share some other things about him, if you think that Sherry Jo Bates was a genuine Zodiac killer victim, the murder of Sherry Jo Bates, which took place on October 30th of 1966, has any connection to the Zodiac killer mystery. Even the people who are saying that, okay, the Zodiac didn't murder Sherry Jo Bates, but the Zodiac killer was the person who wrote the letters taking credit for it, talking about messing with the distributor coil of the car and talking about Bates had to die, there will be more. If you think that any of that is genuine, Donald Lee Booyak is not your man. Because what did we say? He was in jail for 11 years, serving 11 years on a life sentence for the murder of Otto Fossen that we just talked about here. He was in jail. Kevin Robert Brooks acknowledges that, and he openly says Donald Lee Booyak was imprisoned in Montana, so he couldn't have had anything to do with that. And in 2019 on this channel, we were getting a lot of comments to come in, like you guys were sending in a lot of comments about how the Zodiac killer could have been somebody who was very well read, but not super educated. And that is what you would have to say about some guy like Donald Lee Booyak, because perhaps in the first video that I pulled up from Kevin Robert Brooks, and I've seen them before, but I really wanted to refresh and really get more of his information down pat. He said that Donald Lee Booyak completed the 9th grade, and then he dropped out, and the rest of his education would have either come from the military or just things that he learned on his own, because he was very passionate about movies, he was very passionate about science fiction, he was a very curious individual, but he would definitely go into that category, someone who was not well educated, but very well-read and up-to-date and familiar with things, definitely has the connections to fantasy, but in terms of education, only finishing the 9th grade, would he have had the know-how and mathematical awareness to have anything to do with the creation of the Zodiac Killer ciphers and all of those mathematical clues that are hidden in there? Because within the last 12 months, I think a lot of people have been writing and saying things that are quite to the contrary of what people were talking about in 2019 a lot, about how there's this guy who's just very well read but not super educated. I mean, the suspects that we've been talking about more recently have been like Ted Kaczynski, a PhD in mathematics. And we also did one episode on the murder of Nikki Benedict recently, looking at Joe's suspect, Joe from Zodiac Killer Insights. His suspect in that is Gareth Penn, someone who also was very well educated, had a very high understanding of mathematics. And Gareth Penn talks about who? Michael O'Hare as a suspect in the Zodiac Killer mystery. Once again, someone else who is also educated at the graduate level. And people are simply saying that, could somebody who only had a 9th grade education pulled off anything to do with the Zodiac Killer mystery? And a lot of people think that that is impossible. And it's not only that they think that, they're also saying that there are certain clues that have been put in place that show that this person had a very high understanding of mathematics that came from an educated background. Another point is that Donald Lee Booyak did do things in the military, like working with light armored vehicles, but is that really enough? And we will explore some things in a variety of different ways. But what I would want to do is to move over to a new website that I discovered, newspapers.com/clip. that talks about Donald Lee Booyak and the murder of Otto Fossen. And just like it sounds, newspapers.com/clip, they have a clip here from the events that took place in 1957. Booyak will enter a plea on Monday. Chester, Montana. Donald L. Booyak, age 21 of Roundup, Montana, was charged with pumping 5 fatal bullets into Liberty County Undersheriff Otto Fossen and will enter a plea to the first-degree murder charge Tuesday. Entering of the plea was postponed from tomorrow. At the same time, it was announced that Billings attorney Paul G. Olson had withdrawn from the case. He had agreed to represent Booyak. Liberty County attorney William E. Hunt of Chester filed the first-degree murder charges 5 days after the 67-year-old Fossen, 67-year-old Fossen, was murdered on October 10th. Booyak was transferred to the Cascade County Jail in Great Falls, Montana, October 13th because his attorney charged that the sanitary facilities in the Chester jail were inadequate. As far as this Olson guy, I think that he came from a high-profile political family in Montana. I believe he was the brother of the unsuccessful candidate for governor in 1956, and Donald Lee Booyak had requested him. I saw that in one of the other sources, but 67 years old was the age of Otto Fossen. It really does look like 87 here in the blurry text, but when I was looking at Otto Fossen's obituary, I believe it said that he was born in 1890, and then he passed away, of course, in 1957, of course, making him 67 years old. So it's quite crazy to think about how someone who could have had any major influence on a Zodiac killer suspect being born in the 1800s, but we do experience this from time to time. For example, when we were talking about the Texarkana Moonlight murders of 1946 that took place, well, in Texarkana, of course, that was in 46, but then the first Zodiac killer murders took place in 1968, and David Gold even talks about how his suspect Frank Morris was the murderer in both of those instances, but the Moonlight murders only occurred like less than 60 years after Jack the Ripper in 1888. I guess if we're going to 1946, it would be 58 years or something. It really is not that, well, in some ways it's a long amount of time, but in other ways it's not that long in terms of a time frame. But just looking at the how expansive some of these events are becoming, and I mean, really, we have to give a big rest in peace to Otto Fossen. He seemed like somebody who was loved by the community, and there was even this one thread online where people are just sharing their stories about knowing him personally. The people who would have known him in the early 1950s, and they would have been children at the time, they still remembered him all the way up into the new millennium. And as you heard, though, perhaps the biggest manhunt in northern Montana history. 200 people were out looking for Donald Lee Booyak. Now, if I recall from reading in one of these articles, or perhaps it was from one of Kevin Robert Brooks's videos, and I highly recommend you watch his videos on YouTube, because I believe he said that Donald Lee Booyak actually surrendered because of the pressure that was on him because of the manhunt. And what he did with the bullets from the Fossen shooting was he actually took the cartridges out of the handgun that he had used to kill Otto Fossen, and he ingested them, like he swallowed the cartridges. And when he was being booked, he informed the authorities of that, and they used an X-ray machine to determine that that was indeed true, that he had 2 cartridges in his stomach, and he had to pass them out through natural causes. But I mean, Donald Lee Booyak is someone who definitely seems like somebody who wasn't a pleasant person to be around. And according to the things that I learned from Kevin Robert Brooks, who has talked to his family extensively, it appears that he had a very rough upbringing. He had a bad connection with his mother. And as we said, he had that untreated illness of like strep and tonsillitis that affected his not only his physical health, but also his mental state. And Kevin Robert Brooks theorized that it's even possible that Donald Lee Booyak could have been a born psychopath, or he just was very, very deviant and showed an enormous amount of negligence to the law. So you can see that this is a guy who is very much a criminal, and not, as we said though, there's no messing around about it. He was a convicted murderer, and he attempted to steal somebody's car. When he couldn't get away with that, he murdered a police officer, sentenced to life in prison, served 11 years of that. And since I've been following true crime stuff more frequently, I can definitely tell you that that is not abnormal. I was just listening to the I Survived podcast the other day. It's like the show I Survived, but I listened to it in the podcast form. I get it from podcast1.com. They were also talking about how somebody served 12 years of a life sentence and they were released. They're like, life in prison can mean 10 years, 11 years, 12 years. They're saying it doesn't mean you're actually spending the rest of your life in jail. I don't know about you guys, but did you ever watch the show Scared Straight, or the TV special Scared Straight, or for me, from my generation, Scared Straight 20 years later? And I remember looking at that as a kid and I was thinking, there's this guy that they have serving life plus 10 years. And I was like, how can anybody serve 10 years after the end of their life? Yeah, that doesn't mean anything. Life in prison does not mean the end of your lifetime. 10 years, 11 years, 12 years. This is very normal. Donald Lee Booyak is a prime example of that. And I would like to talk more about the claims in regards to Donald Lee Booyak as a Zodiac killer suspect right after this. Bum ba bum 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 ba bum 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 ba bum bum bum. At this time, I would like to talk about some of the ways in which you can help Black Box Online Radio. This channel relies on your support, and the best way you can help out is just by listening to some more content. If you like what you hear, you can hit that like button, subscribe, and share with your friends on social media. But I should also say that Black Box Online Radio now has a Teespring page, and there will be some links in the description box. Please feel free to check out some of the merchandise that is available. Almost all sizes and colors are listed. So, you can also help out by going over to the Zodiac Killer channel and watching the documentary series Obsession into Darkness, parts 1, 2, and 3. I was one of the contributors for that, and you can see some other great Zodiac content on the Zodiac Killer channel. And yes, there will be a part 4 of Obsession into Darkness at some point in the future. And for now, let's get back to the show. Okay, hello and welcome back. So at this time, I would like to talk a little bit more about Donald Lee Booyak as a Zodiac killer suspect. In the early part, we were mentioning a lot of things about his connections to the murder of Otto Fossen, which he was indeed convicted of, and that took place in 1957. As we said, I think it's important to say those things first, but in regards to whether or not he had any involvement to the Zodiac killer murders in 1968 and 69, I would like to go through a series of claims that have been made by Kevin Robert Brooks. Firstly, before we get into some of the more challenging ones, I think it's very valuable that Brooks found a suspect who met a lot of the physical descriptions, who had a stutter as a kid and corrected it by talking in a very slow and monotone way, the way that Nancy Slover described the Zodiac killer on the phone talking about the double murder, someone who did not have an accent but a very unusual speaking cadence. Brian Hartnell also said that about the attacker at Lake Berryessa, that if he heard that voice again, he could recognize it because there's something very abnormal or unusual. Firstly, many of the skeptics to any of these theories would just simply say that the person who was making the phone calls and at Lake Berryessa was disguising his voice by talking in a flat monotone way, but it's important to note that there are no hints of any type of foreign accent. And Donald Lee Booyak, of course, from Montana, he would still be an American, but in terms of like not only his voice, he also walked with a limp of sorts. He had a very unusual walk, and this has been noted countless times. I mean, people said that after the Stein shooting, the perpetrator was seen leaving with an unusual walk. So, I mean, I do commend Kevin Robert Brooks for selecting Donald Lee Booyak as a suspect in those regards. Now, some of the things that I will take exception to and just a flat-out challenge, you're going to go through a series of graphics here on the screen, so I hope you can, I hope you're following along with those. And the first is that there was a map that was sent in that where the Zodiac killer is talking about Mount Diablo, and it needs to be set to magnetic north. And I mean, apparently it's from Phillips 66, like it has the the Phillips Petroleum Company logo is on the map, and Kevin Robert Brooks even calls it the Phillips Petroleum map that was included in something that the Zodiac had mailed in. And he's saying that the meaning of this is that the person who sent this in wanted you to look at a map of Montana and see that what is the county where Donald Lee Booyak was from? Muscle Shells, which is directly south of Petroleum County, Montana, which is directly south of Phillips County, Montana. So this Phillips Petroleum map, this is meant to show that you need to go set your compass to magnetic north, and Muscle Shells, go north, you'll get to Petroleum County. Petroleum County, go north, you'll get to Phillips County. And he's like, the problem that I have with this type of thinking is, okay, let's also look at the map of Montana. Why not Lake County for Lake Berryessa and Lake Herman Road? Why not Park County for Blue Rock Springs Park and such? I mean, this is almost just looking at the Zodiac Killer mystery and just pulling out similar words, just pulling out any type of verbiage that is the same, like that is found in the Zodiac letters or something that the Zodiac mailed in. Because as we see, it's not even so much something that was written in the letter, it's from this logo on the map, the Phillips 66 logo. So it's like he's just finding any words that are similar and attaching that to his particular suspect. And you could do this in a variety of ways, as we said also about Lake County, Montana and Park County, Montana. You could find a way to do this in a particular way. And all I see in this exact example is pattern seeking, trying to force a pattern onto the narrative that has already been established. Another example of possible pattern seeking that Kevin Robert Brooks does in the Zodiac Killer mystery is he talks about how Donald Lee Booyak was in the infantry, right? We said he worked with light armored vehicles, and the badge that he had from the infantry was blue, and that the Zodiac Killer letters were written with a blue felt tip pen. And we mentioned a lot of this in the Myth of the Zodiac Killer book discussion, which I would invite all of you to check out if you haven't heard that yet. There are also some possibilities about the blue ink and the significance of the blue ink that could be discussed in that one. But he's saying that the Zodiac is trying to clue you in onto who he is because he's writing in blue ink, and the badge from Donald Lee Booyak's military service was blue. And I really do not care for this type of thinking because does he have any reason to say that? I mean, did the Zodiac leave any type of sentences in the letters or leave any type of clues to say, oh yeah, blue is the color of a military badge or something like that? All he's doing is just looking at something and saying, hey, this ink is blue. Hey, this badge is blue. Therefore, there's a connection. I mean, the color blue. I really find that this type of thinking is ineffective because, I mean, it's pattern seeking. It's taking a pattern and trying to make the facts fit that established narrative. And a lot of that is going on with the Donald Lee Booyak case. I mean, just all of the material about Donald Lee Booyak as a Zodiac Killer suspect. And in that very general upload, we did talk about some of the things in regards to the Zodiac Killer Halloween card. But, Kevin Robert Brooks has an enormous amount of things to say about it, so I'll just repeat some of that info here. And most notably, if you open up the Halloween card that was mailed in 1970, I think it was actually sent October 27th of 1970, but don't quote me on that, so more than 12 months after the final confirmed Zodiac Killer incident with the murder of Paul Stine, you open it up and it says, Boo. And what was his name? Booyak. You got the boo for Booyak. Yeah, okay, once again, I do not expect that that is actually what the Zodiac Killer was trying to convey, let alone he also is stating that when on the envelope to the Halloween card, certain letters were underlined, and first it's misspelled Paul Aver Lee. It was mailed to Paul Avery, but he misspelled Avery's name Aver Lee because what's his middle name? Lee. So, like, he's hiding a signature in that as well. And the letters that are underlined are LAV, right? Light Armored Vehicle, because Donald Lee Booyak worked with light armored vehicles. I mean, the thing is with Kevin Robert Brooks, how does he know that this is what the person was trying to convey? I know that it's theoretical. He is very clear that these are his theories, but where is he getting that from? It's like, First he found the guy, now he's trying to make all the facts fit his suspect. He's trying to make all the facts cooperate with his particular suspect, so it all makes it look like this guy was the Zodiac killer. As you can see, I'm somewhat skeptical of Donald Lee Booyak having any involvement in the Zodiac killer mystery, but I think the Montana connection is something worth exploring. I think that this is an interesting theory. I definitely think that I want to know more about Donald Lee Booyak as a person because he's heavily connected to the true crime world, and I mean the story of Otto Fossen there I think is also very valuable. And I do have one thing to share with you about the murder of Otto Fossen, and we were talking about the town of Havre, Montana. And as someone who isn't familiar from the area, I had never heard of this town before, so I had to look up how to pronounce it. We have a town in Maryland, which isn't too far away from my part of West Virginia, called Havre de Grace, and I expected that it was pronounced Havre or maybe Havre, depending on how French you want to get. But I found this one video out that is apparently not even doing it very well, and people in the comment section, or at least one person, was saying that it was an incorrect pronunciation. But I just had to share this with you. This is a trip to Heaver, Montana.
Haver, Montana, a great place to visit. Haver, Montana.
I'm sorry for that. I just had to share that because sometimes the internet can be really creepy in an unnecessary way. Now, in regards to this Montana connection, just to give some different perspectives on the subject, there is the book America's Jack the Ripper that is written by Soren Korsgaard, who talks about how he believes that the Zodiac killer was possibly a Canadian citizen, saying that none of the major suspects are fitting. But the reason why you have that connection to Deer Lodge Prison in Montana, which maybe the Zodiac killer didn't even say, and there's some reasons why we'll say in just a second, but I mean, he's saying that this was a Canadian national who had crossed over the border into the United States of America, first going through Montana, because Montana has numerous border crossings with various provinces, and you even heard about how Donald Lee Booyak stole that car from someone who was a resident of Saskatchewan, so it doesn't necessarily have to mean that this person was actually at Deer Lodge Prison in Montana. A lot of people have explanations about why the Zodiac killer could have been talking about any type of prison in Montana. I mean, this is one of the few times when I turned to Gary Stewart, and Gary Stewart said that he believed that that dialogue was used to make the victims comply. He's saying the stuff like, I escaped from a prison in Deer Lodge, Montana, I killed a guard, and that is talking about only trying to get Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard to go along with what he wants. He's trying to intimidate them, more or less. And Steve Hodel said something which was somewhat similar, that he wasn't actually at Deer Lodge Prison, the Zodiac killer, that is. Instead, it's just meant to be confusing. There's certain things there that are meant to be confusing and kind of down a similar pathway so that the victims would go along with what the perpetrator wanted them to do. And other people simply think that this guy was just trying to sound badass, or that when the Zodiac killer was in costume and committing the crimes, he's almost playing a different character, not exactly like a genuinely psychotic split personality, but he has created this Zodiac persona and he's trying to live that out. So it doesn't necessarily mean that he would have had to have been in Deer Lodge Prison. And as Soren Korsgaard pointed out, it's possible someone could have just learned about Deer Lodge Prison passing through Montana. I mean, I don't necessarily have to say that it was a Canadian national the way that Korsgaard would, but I can definitely follow that type of thinking. And the other thing I would say is if you follow the Zodcast, which is hosted by Drew Beeson, please, if you do listen to his show, please check out episode number 15. I think he absolutely hit that one out of the park with all the things that he talks about with a different Donald. Not Donald Lee Booyak, but Donald Lee Cheney. And he's also looking at how there's this one transcript that they are going through when it shows that Brian Hartnell might not have even heard the Zodiac killer say Deer Lodge. Maybe one of the detectives corrected him on that and asked him, did he say Deer Lodge in Montana? But I definitely think that that is very valuable, because if the perpetrator did not say Deer Lodge Prison in Montana at Lake Berryessa, I think that would almost certainly eliminate Donald Lee Booyak as a Zodiac killer suspect. He is definitely a criminal. He is definitely a creepy guy. I don't think that I would have ever wanted to have spent time with Donald Lee Booyak as a person because just based on how closed he was, it seemed like he really dealt with a lot of lack of bonding with his parents, and he never really learned how to interact with other people. Kevin Robert Brooks frequently describes him as a loner, as somebody who was really just not getting along well with other people. But at the same time, he's also someone who's very interested in literature, very interested in movies, very interested in science fiction. And those elements are present. The other thing that Kevin Robert Brooks has contributed is in regards to the Exorcist letter, and that talks about how there are these symbols on the Exorcist letter that appear to be Japanese, maybe they could be Chinese or Japanese kanji or something like that. I've sent those to numerous people in China, and I've asked them, can you recognize any of those symbols? And they say no. So, in terms of Chinese characters, it's possible that those are just like little funky symbols, but what Kevin Robert Brooks said in regards to those symbols on the Exorcist letter is that they're actually from a poster of the Mikado that was put out once because the Zodiac Killer was talking about the Mikado in the Exorcist letter, Titwillow, 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 from the Mikado, of course, and plunging into the or like to the suicide grave. That is also a reference from the Mikado, one of the final songs in the production, actually. Now, I would like to go over to a website, zodiacciphers.com. If you do not read zodiacciphers.com, I would hope that you do. I think it's one of the best Zodiac websites out there, as well as Zodiac Killer ciphers from time to time. When I was first putting out Zodiac Killer uploads here on this channel, I would reference both of them, and I would always get them confused. Zodiac ciphers, Zodiac Killer ciphers. I'm a fan of both. Big thank you to Richard and everybody else out there. Kevin Robert Brooks has done extensive research into the Zodiac case and firmly believes that he has identified the notorious serial killer as Donald Lee Booyak, with numerous interesting coincidences between Booyak's life and the Zodiac letters. But here we will concentrate on his findings regarding the Halloween card mailed on October 27th, 1970. Hey, yeah, we got the date right. To Paul Avery, a reporter at the San Francisco Chronicle. Firstly, Donald Lee Booyak had a military background, serving with the 6th Infantry Division for approximately 8 months in 1954. The 6th Infantry Division of the United States Army was active in World War I, World War II, and the last years of the Cold War, known as the Red Star, formerly called the Sightseeing 6th. The 6th Division was reactivated on the 4th of October 1950 at Fort Ord, California. So this is, as you heard, Donald Lee Booyak getting out of prison in Montana, going back to California. All planned in advance, was it? There, the division remained throughout the Korean War, training troops and providing personnel for combat, but was never deployed overseas as an entity itself and was again inactivated on the 3rd of April 1956. While stationed there, Booyak would have come across the California Veterans Association symbol, which looks very similar to the symbol placed on the upper left of the the card. And yes, that symbol is also quite similar to the one that is used by Red Rider, and but it's also can be viewed as a signature on the Halloween card. You can see that someone might be saying something about their name, and then it says Z, and then the Zodiac sign. Like, they're almost signing their name as Zodiac Killer, and they're giving hints to what could be their name. While stationed there, Booyak would have come across, yep, the symbol, yeah, we read that. Kevin Robert Brooks draws your attention to the symbol at the bottom of the Halloween card, believing the line section with 4 dots for Z4F decoded is Zodiac is a veteran with 4F regarding to the medical grounds to which Donald Lee Booyak was released from the Army. The medical release records indicated issues of mental health to which Booyak suffered from throughout his life. And to share some things about that, Donald Lee Booyak was bipolar, so that also contributes to something, and that's worth investigating in the Zodiac Killer mystery as well, just like mental state and such, looking about the possibility of someone being, someone having some type of either manic depressive or psychotic illness going on. I'm not necessarily sure about too much of that because I'm not a psychiatrist, but you can go over to Dr. Todd Grande's channel and you can hear our response to Dr. Todd Grande's Zodiac personality profile if you'd like here on this channel. I mean, I can respond to the content and listen to what other people say about it, but I definitely can't do diagnostics too well. And then the next one is that symbol, Veterans 4F, is perhaps widely accepted that it is something that came from Red Rider, and it's not necessarily the way that Brooks portrayed it. And I'm not convinced of that either, but I, anyway, I would just want to say that I think that Donald Lee Booyak is an interesting suspect, but what's more valuable is perhaps to learn about him as a criminal and learn about the ways in which he committed crimes that he was actually, convicted for, like the murder of Otto Fossen. I think that stuff could be a little bit more valuable in the true crime world. We can also see perhaps about how Donald Lee Booyak could have been involved in a prison riot when he was in Montana. And I just have to share one more thing. Possible solution to the 408 cipher. The final line is "Meet the hippie riot." Thank you to whoever sent me that. I forget which user wrote that in, but I mean, if you're going to talk about the hippies in 1968 and 69, as well as the riot that could have taken place in Donald Lee Booyak's prison in Montana, meet the hippie riot. Maybe that's a clue, or maybe that's just pattern seeking. Please share anything you have to say in the comments section below. I would love to hear what you would want to contribute. And if you have any ideas about the Zodiac Killer or Donald Lee Booyak as a murderer and the death of Otto Fossen, please drop something in the comments section below. Big rest in peace to Otto Fossen and the Zodiac Killer victims. That's all for me now. I will see you guys on Instagram for the bonus podcast. Until next time.